Mike, are you coming? Let's go. Dr. Mike Bolton is going to introduce our next speaker, and somewhere out there, I do believe most of the class of 2017 has arrived. And thanks, Sarah, for getting them here.
Hi, Elena. Thanks a lot. Thanks for letting us be here. First, I have to say what CJ is doing is good, and I hope our puppy was lucky enough to land in one of her shelters. August 16th, we had a yellow lab that was stolen at a rest stop. A 6-month-old puppy, so we hope that our dog was lucky. My name is Mike Bolton. I'm a long-time dairy practitioner in Michigan, and now work for Merck Animal Health in the technical service area. And some of my special projects I've been allowed to work on have to do with training at the level of the Hispanic worker on the dairy, with areas of such as stockmanship. And it's been my great pleasure in the past year to have been able to collaborate with your next speaker. Dr. Shearer is a longtime friend. He's now a professor and a veterinary extension veterinarian at Iowa State University. But you must know about Dr. Shearer, he is a Buckeye through and through. He graduated from Ashland College in 1971, got his degree at The Ohio State University in veterinary medicine in 1975, spent nearly 5 years in Orville, Ohio in a dairy practice, went back to OSU, planned on getting an advanced degree, which he did, and then planned on staying in the great state of Ohio for the rest of his life. But as life does to people, it changed, and he spent the next 27 years at University of Florida, Gainesville, and our profession's been much richer for it. He has numerous awards, which I won't go into. He's been past chair of the AABP Animal Welfare Committee, and is presently a charter member of the American College of Animal Welfare. And I think his subject will interest you all, and it does me, and anybody that's involved in agriculture should listen closely. So, and anybody that isn't should listen closer. So, anyway, all right. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and Merck is very proud to sponsor our next speaker, Dr. Shearer.
I have no idea.
Okay, now I think we're working. Good. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Bolton. Thanks to the organizer of this great conference. I've had the pleasure to be here the last couple of years and just really enjoy it. And pleasure to be back again. Share some thoughts with you, slightly different subject than I've talked about in the past and that I talk about frequently, but I hope maybe it will be of some interest and maybe address this disconnect that I think that we feel from time to time with respect to animal welfare, society, and particularly how they envision, I think, the livestock industry at times. And I use some work that comes from an author called R.J. Solomon, who writes about an Indian legend that I want to share with you. It's about the Indian who killed too many. There was once an Indian and a hunter whose skill was beyond all other hunters. Day after day he hunted. And he killed and he killed and he killed. Never was his family or his people hungry. So they abandoned him. But his people became fearful. that he would kill all of the animals, so they abandoned him. When the hunter found his people gone, he was hurt and confused. How could they abandon the one who fed them? The pain he felt was so great that he entered a deep depression, a trance where he dreamed that he was being hunted and consumed by the sea lions which he himself had once hunted. After he'd been consumed by the sea lions, he suddenly awoke from the trance and began to search for his people, who were then, by that time, very hungry. When the hunter saw their hunger, he began to sing praise to all the animals who had ever fed his people, and to all those that would soon feed his people again. He then began, once more, to do that which he was born to do. He began to hunt, but this time, his heart carried the memory of what it felt like to be hunted. So the point here is, through the abandonment by his people and his subsequent dream, the hunter was forced to acknowledge and reconsider his unconscious treatment of animals. He was also able to see, which is very important, and the crux of what I want to talk about, that his people were willing to go hungry rather than risk the continued unrestrained and unconscious killing of animals. So we look at our culture today, and I'll be using this as symbolizing the people banning the hunter as symbolic of, to some extent, the increasing criticism that we see directed toward our livestock production systems. There are many parallels in symbolism. And that'll be what I spent most of my time here discussing today. So let's start with this. The hunter's skill was beyond that of all others, but his people became fearful they would kill all the animals, so they abandoned him. Doesn't sound possible, or is it? When I was a young boy, my father taught me this, or told me this story, about the extinction of the American passenger pigeon. My brother and I were avid hunters, you see. And my father told us this story, I think, because he wanted to make this point. Very interesting, and everyone, every hunter for sure, should be told this story. It's more than a story, of course. John Ottoman reported in the autumn of 1830 that he witnessed a flock 1 mile wide that passed overhead for 3 solid hours. So great were their numbers that the atmosphere was impregnated with the odor of the birds. That's all the birds. The air was literally filled with them. The light of the noonday sun was obscured as though by an eclipse. But how did the impossible happen? The early settlers hunted them with firearms, clubs, and stones, and nets. They followed them relentlessly. Hundreds of dogs were killed at a time. Squabs and young were easy prey for the hunters, and others died as a result of the loss of the adults. As one author writes, the birds were so persistently molested that they finally lost their coherence. They were scattered far and wide and became extinct, mainly through the constant uncontrolled hunting by man. Over a short period of just 20 to 25 years, an entire species, numbering in the billions, was extinguished. The impossible was achieved by a controlled, modernized, and mechanized killing technology that made their removal and their killing so so much easier. Gone forever. September 1st, 1914. Not only the passenger pigeon, but we've seen this also occur as a consequence for the American bison. This is a mountain of buffalo skulls here. You can see this. Can you imagine how many buffalo are represented there? They're American bison, once numbered in the hundreds of millions in North America. But its numbers were decreased to about 1,000 in 1890. Fortunately, as you all know, conservation efforts have revitalized the population to about 500,000 in North America today. Most are kept on ranches and raised as livestock. Those bison that are truly wild number only about 20,000. The whooping crane. Only one of 2 species of cranes that exist in North America. Unregulated hunting and the pride of that tail feather that you see there reduced their numbers to just 21 in 1941, and 2 captives. Conservation efforts have successfully increased their numbers to 437 or so, and in the wild, that is, and now in captivity in excess of 165. Here's the other crane. Yeah, this is Sam and Sandy. These are at my little farm, or our little farm in Micanopy, Florida. They've become quite pets, as you can see here, because they're always up at the feeder whenever we feed our cows, of course, and keep them from getting run over. At times we've had to kind of throw some corn out a little ways away from the feeders so that nothing happens to them. But these birds have become extremely, docile and very, very comfortable with our presence. And they have bred in our pond in front, a little island in our pond in the front now, for the last 20 years. So they've become, just like part of the family almost, you see. And then, of course, the American alligator. It was also hunted near extinction in the 1950s and 60s. I, as a kid, remember very well that there wasn't a store anywhere in the southeast, in particular Florida, that you couldn't purchase a baby alligator to bring home to the north, to the Midwest. I see a few people shaking their heads because you remember those times. Was that the craziest thing? How could we have been so crazy as to let something like that happen? Right? Silly. But that's how we work. In 1967, they were officially listed on the Protection of Endangered Species Act. In 1987, 20 years later, the American alligator was delisted. Another success story. But we've done this so many times. It seems so crazy. And I think now, as many deer as we have running all over the place, and how much of a nuisance they are, we still need to be careful, right? Because I hear people say, oh my goodness, I wish they would just have open season year-round on deer. No, I don't think so, right? We still need to manage it. We don't ever want to be in that situation. But fearful that he would kill all the animals, the 100 people abandoned him. And again, as I say, I see symbolism here that I think is important for us. And it refers to increasing criticism we see directed toward us in the livestock industry. Societal views are very different. We have a real disconnect with them. much of society, including us to a large extent, embrace a childlike perspective of the world. That is an unrealistic viewpoint of the world and life. High-tech agriculture, on the other hand, as well, honors technology, performance, and profit above welfare. It's changing a little bit, and that's not everyone in American agriculture. But that's, unfortunately, a lot of us. And that's a problem. And that's the reason we have such a serious disconnect. And we've got to continue to work to change it. The childlike perspective of life. An urbanized society, the movement of our population from rural to urban areas. Prior to World War II, 25% of the U.S. population was engaged in farming. Today, less than 1 to 2%. Anthropomorphism. Describing human characteristics and values to animals, we all do it. We're all comfortable with it. We've lived with it forever, thanks to Disney. Animals have the ability to speak and carry on conversations in films and cartoons blur the lines between humans and animals. Yeah, Angus is right. But I like this also is that we understand, I think, the importance of anthropomorphism. First of all, for most urbanites, it's the only experience they've ever had with animals as companions in their homes. And I like what Bernie Rollins says. Well, you know, the good thing about anthropomorphism is it's the first step or the first stage of development of moral consciousness. He's right on. You know, he really is. I like that. It's also complicated by evolution and evolutionary biology. We see the similarities between humans and animals, emotional states and personalities. Yes, they exist. They sure do. Candace Crony, at a recent meeting we were at, spoke about a study that's actually been able to detect rats and rodents laughing. Yeah, scientific evidence that rats and rodents can actually laugh. I was amazed at that. Incredible, right? But there are emotional states and personalities in animals, and that makes many people in the livestock industry a little bit uncomfortable, you see. But it's a reality. We have to accept it. Equality in the rights of people and animals. And another one that I think is so important, and I think we all struggle with this. Most people fail to comprehend the concept of the universal rhythm of life. First, evolutionary biology. As children, we grew up with pets. A number of images taught us that animals think and feel and speak just as we do. Evolutionary biology tells us that we are descendants of the animals around us and are therefore very, very similar to them. Yes, connections. These are connections. Equality. The expanding rights of animals are similar to the expanding rights of people in different social classes throughout history, with evolutionary biology telling us that animals really are similar to us. Society reaches the conclusion that animals need protection, just as we do. And then there's this, the childlike perspective of life. And this is really problematic for us in the livestock industry, is that it fails to be able to comprehend, in a way, this universal rhythm of life that includes birth, but also includes death, of course, and rebirth. Let me try to explain that. It's a central theme in Christianity and most world religions, that there is birth, and there is death, and there is some form of rebirth, whatever that might be. For Christians, it's Christ was born, Christ was crucified, and then resurrected. It's also consistent with the cycle of the seasons. Spring spawns rebirth, and of course summer, that development and growth phase, and then it all ends in the fall. It's also demonstrated by the cycle of molecules and cells within our bodies. Life in general is one grand rhythm of birth, death, and rebirth. The problem is, though, that to honor death as a miracle equivalent to that of birth is one of mankind's most challenging struggles. Of course, it is. It's that great unknown for us, you see. So this is part of the challenge that we must deal with. The other reality is that directly or indirectly, every human being, every living thing must kill to survive. We didn't make the rules. We just live by them. There are no options for us as individuals or species, since life is essentially fueled by death. I like this from R.K. Salmon only because I think it helps to put it all into perspective. That even those who feast on the vegetables and fruits to avoid participating in the slaughter of animals are simply playing intellectual mind games. What right does anyone have to create a hierarchy of life forms, or the killing of plants is acceptable, or the killing of animals is not? Good question, I think. When we went to veterinary school, Dr. Bolton and I, and some others here, I'm sure, we learned a lot about meat inspection, public health, and we all went through a packing plant, poultry plant, swine plant, cattle plant. I remember it very well. But our students don't get there today. And society never gets there. We've sterilized this whole process of how meat actually gets into the counter in the supermarket, to the point that people don't understand. We've lost track and lost total touch with what our ancestors did to survive, you see. And now it's a problem for us. Because we have a society that really struggles with the idea of slaughtering animals for human consumption. And then we struggle with what animals we're going to slaughter for human consumption in general. And all of this becomes very complicated. In the words of Albert Schweitzer, a person is constantly forced to preserve his own life, and life in general, only at the cost of other life. If he has been touched by the ethic of reverence for life, you see, he injures and destroys life only under the necessity he cannot avoid, and never from thoughtlessness. I'm okay with slaughter of livestock for food when I know that we've done the right thing for this animal. We've provided it with the proper quality of life, like you said. And then we've given it a quick, humane death at slaughter. And we need to get comfortable with that, okay? We need to understand that that's how these things are intended to work and how they should work. When the hunter found his people gone, he was hurt and confused. How could they abandon the one who fed them? The pain was so great that he ended this period of severe depression, a trance where he dreamed that he was being hunted and consumed by the sea lions that he himself had once hunted. See, society has their challenges with the childlike perspective of life. But high-tech agriculture, you see, is struggling desperately with this as well, because we tend to view and we tend to honor technology, performance, and profit above the sacrifices of animals for the good of mankind. And I will come back to that in a minute. No, I'll come back to it now. I was recently on a farm. I do a lot of work from time to time as working with foot trimmers and on dairy farms. And not long ago, we came across a cow that had a claw lesion on both claws. Now, normally, if it's on one claw, we can put a block on the good, healthy claw and get the weight off of that painful, damaged claw. And allow this animal then to, be able to be mobile again without so much discomfort. So I came across this cow. I worked with a trimmer here, and we had this cow that had 2 bad claws. And it just so happened that the manager was going by, and I yelled at the manager, and said, "Hey, come here a minute. I want to talk to you." I said, "I want you to see this cow right here." I said, "I think we can get a block fastened on this foot to make this cow comfortable enough to be able to get around. But I want you to move her onto slaughter just as soon as you can. I don't want you to move her far. I want you to move her someplace close by." Because I knew there was a place close by. And his first word was, "Doc, I'll be right back. Let me check her record." Okay. I thought, well, maybe he's going to see if she has a residue that he needs a holder for or something, right? I see some smiles out there, you know. When he came back to me, he said, "Doc, she's milking 80 pounds. He said, you get a block on there." He says, "We're not selling her." It's priorities, folks, and values. So let's look at how this all got this way. There are several modes of thought, and over time, we've seen our industry progress to where it is, and I love it, and it's a great thing. We've all benefited from it. It's described by David Fraser in 4 different ways. We have the pastoralist view, which is that captured in the Bible, where animals are entrusted to humans for care and as possessions are used in appropriate ways. We have the agrarian view that many people like, and we still have some of. Animals are not so much possessions, but more like partners in the rural life of farmers. A wholesome life we have with that, and harmony with nature, and the cycles we're living. It is the preference of most of the critics of modern agriculture, of course, because of the view that it takes of animals in that situation. Then we have the view of the romanticism. People view animals as fellow beings, okay, very anthropomorphic. Then we have it through the lens of industrialism, which is what has happened to our industry, of course, and for very good reasons, and for lots of good reasons, which I'll talk about briefly. But animals are now listed workers in efficient production systems under this kind of assessment. Good production means good welfare. Maintenance of health production are accomplished by application of science and technology, and it's where the factory farm concept grew. Of course, it began in earnest after World War II, where the change from the agrarian model to this very industrialized model really grew fast. Because we were trying to produce food. And you talk to anybody in Europe about starvation and how terrible things were there. We have never experienced that. If you talk to anybody who has experienced that, and you will understand why this in part has developed. But the key element in industrialism, of course, is progress. It embraces technology. Science plays a key role in moving this forward, moving it forward. Productivity is highly valued. Decades that followed World War II, farm animal production became highly industrialized, of course. Tiers for laying hens, gestation stalls for sows, individual crates for pens for veal calves. In the 1990s, the European Union moved to ban all of these things. And I think for appropriate reasons. And the same is happening here. But it's causing a great deal of stress for our industries to be able to conform to what we need to do. And the bottom line is it's going to cost us a lot more. It's kind of, if you will, moving backwards from where we just got to. And so it's difficult, it's challenging. I think it's for the right reasons, but it's difficult. It's very difficult. And it's going to take some time. But these things have also brought on a series of laws to protect the welfare of animals. And these are just some of the most recent ones. And I'm sure there are more to come. I would like to think that we could regulate all these things internally as an industry. I'm not sure that we can sometimes. And that's what worries me. That would be the better way. I'd rather not to have laws managing what we do. This factory farm concept, of course, was depicted originally by Ruth Harrison, author of the book Animal Machines, in 1964. She triggered an investigation by the Bramble Committee that ultimately ended up in the development of the 5 freedoms that Lana spoke to earlier. But I cite here one of the things from her book that says, life in the factory farm revolves entirely around profits and animals, are accessed purely for their ability to convert food into flesh and saleable products. See, that's an image we have. It's not positive, for sure. She also reported on the feeding of antibiotics, growth stimulants, hormones, tranquilizers, and so forth, with no regard to consequences of human consumer. Again, another issue that we're struggling desperately with. So here's the question. What is more important? Animal welfare, performance, profit, or winning shows? Or is that all of the above? I think it's all of the above. But if it's got to be one place or another, the one that's got to be first has got to be welfare. And all the rest will be there. And we know that in the livestock industry. But sometimes we forget. But if we look at animal agriculture's response to these increasing criticisms at times, we see tactics that we use, such as confrontation, isolation, Ag-Gag Laws. Arguments such as, of course we care about animal welfare. If we didn't, we wouldn't be profitable. I want to run and hide when I hear somebody say that. I just want to run and hide. Oh my Lord. Because what they don't even realize is they are making the point that their critic is making. And they don't even realize it. We need farmers so we can feed the world. Well, that's true. We do need farmers to feed the world. But do farmers lay awake at night thinking about how am I going to feed the world? I would think that they probably think more along the lines of, we need to feed the world. I do my small part to be a part of that. Are they interested in feeding everyone? Are they just interested in those who can afford it? It's a business, folks. Sooner or later, you have to make a little money on this thing, right? Confrontation is probably of very little value to either confront or comply with those with a childlike perspective of life. How can you change their viewpoints of these kinds of things? The effort to change the minds of extreme folks is largely wasted effort. Well, we try other ways of going about it, instead of building coalitions that include public consumers, we build barriers that foster distrust. We establish Ag-Gag Laws. Seemed like a good idea at the time. I come from a state that has one. It's pretty brave for me to be talking this way. But let me share with you, I don't think that it's the right thing. Because to me it suggests that animal agriculture has something to hide. I think we have something to share. When we're doing it right, I think it's a wonderful thing. And I'd like everybody to see it. When we're doing it wrong, yeah. I like what Candy Crony said recently. She said, why don't we identify and appeal to core values that are common to consumers, common to everyone? Compassion, justice, fairness, and freedom. You see, people tend to support positions and behaviors that reinforce connections with them and others. Of course they do. That's the tactic that's going to probably work, and it's the one that we need to be using more. But we still seem to be many places like this. We need to change our approach. How could they abandon the one who fed them? The pain was so great that he entered a period of severe depression whereby he entered a trance and dreamed that he was being hunted by the sea lions he himself once hunted. He suddenly awoke from the trance and began to search for his people who were, by then, very hungry. Let's look at some current and future realities. Our population is growing rapidly. Currently, there are 7.1 billion people in the world. The estimates are that this number will rise to 9 billion by mid-century. That's not that far away. And there will be a growing number of malnourished. At the current time, food insecurity threatens more than 1 billion people worldwide. Global food costs reached record levels in 2001 and are expected to persist for the foreseeable future. By 2050, we will need 100% more food. 100% more food than we have at the present time. 70% of it must come from efficiency-enhancing technologies. It must come, 70%, from efficiency-enhancing technologies. In the developing world, hunger kills more people worldwide each year than war, AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis combined. Worldwide, 720 children die every hour from a lack of food. Poverty and hunger affects 2 out of every 5 children living in inner London, 1 out of every 8 in France, 1 out of every 7 in Japan. This one really bothers me. Blows my mind. 1 of every 5 in the United States. Gee, how can this be? Nearly 43 billion people in this world live on less than $2 a day. People in developing countries spend 50 to 80% of their total income on food. In the U.S., it's about 10 to 12%. What is the solution to addressing world hunger? Well, I think it's quite clearly technology. Responsible technology, okay? Technology is the key to efficient food production, whether it's plants or animals, in helping to end world hunger, lowering food costs, protecting consumer rights, safeguarding our natural resources. It's going to take more space to produce eggs in the future. It's going to take more space for sows. when we move them from gestation stalls. I think those are good things, and I'm glad to see our industries going in those directions. But it's difficult, and it's going to take time. But then, will it solve the disconnect? I think solving the disconnect, you see, requires changing the image and the nature of the human-animal relationship that we have. Again, I go back to Albert Schweitzer to make the point that I think helps me looking at all of this. To the man who is truly ethical, all life is sacred, including that from which the human point of view seems lower. Man makes distinctions on the pressure of necessity, as for example, involves him to decide which of two lives he must sacrifice in order to preserve the other. But through it all, he knows he bears responsibility for the life that is sacrificed. You see, reverence for life, for all life, is the reason why Temple ground and bows her head in silence when she enters the slaughter plant. It's out of respect. You see, out of respect. It's the reason why the Native American Indians dance around the campfire in celebration after a successful hunt. It's the reason we bow our heads in prayer and thanksgiving. Solving a disconnect also requires that we adopt the idea that welfare of animals is more important than performance, profit, or winning shows. I've had a chance to say that in front of a few producer groups already. And I tell you, not everybody is real comfortable with that. But ladies and gentlemen, I firmly believe that's where we have to go, and we have to begin to think that way. The other thing is, it's a no-brainer. Putting welfare first also makes your performance better, it makes your profit better. It really does. So it is the right thing. It is the right thing. When the hunter awoke from his dream, he began once more to do that which he was born to do. He began to hunt. But this time, his heart carried memory of what it felt like to be hunted and consumed. As the legend of the man who killed 10 men. Once a hunter learned to honor animals for their sacrifice, he earned not only the right to do that which he was born to do, but also the respect of his people. I think that's it. It's as simple as that. Getting it all in perspective, right? If we can do that, we're going to come out just fine. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jan, for a spectacular talk. If we have questions, I'd like to request that you use the microphone. Comments, questions?
Thank you. That's really loud, sorry. I have a question. When we get into a situation where we're trying to get some options or resources to be able to educate a larger number of the, let's call them more urbanized people, or suburban people like myself, and a lot of people are now, I think, afraid to kind of open their doors because they're afraid of retaliation from people who either are upset about a situation or they're ignorant about a situation and that makes them upset. How do we overcome that fear with, like, the Great Pig Adventure actually getting attacked by animal rights groups, even though they've tried to open their doors to them? Additional question, I know.
I'll need help with that question from a lot, I think. But it is really the challenge. None of us want to be confronted, and it's very difficult to find the right answers and the right words to respond in those kinds of situations, quite frankly. But I try to just keep thinking about what is the right thing, what's the priority. Priority is animal welfare, right? And keep yourself focused there and try to identify, as I like what Candace Crony said, I think we need to find those things where we have common ground when you're talking to people who may not be familiar with our industry, and that's a lot of people these days, of course. And so you need to keep it at that level, right? You try to discuss the science of what DST should be used, or why we should use beta agonists, or anything else like that, you see, only drives this whole discussion in a direction that just puts you at odds completely with the person you're discussing the issue with. So I think, and this is what I try to do, is, as Candace Crony says here, as I tried to share with you here, find the common ground and work on those shared values, because that's really where you should be.
Another thing I think you can do is, talk to groups of kids, 4-H kids, FFA kids, elementary school kids, and just tell them what you do and why you do it. Because in essence, there are people whose minds will never be changed. But if you start with the kids who are growing and learning, and maybe we can educate them on the way up, that's another avenue to go to, which is something that I do quite a bit of.
When you mention those kids, their opportunity to speak into the lives of kids in the inner schools, I mean, the whole concept that milk actually starts out warm. It starts a conversation that you can then go further, and sometimes those children bring home to their parents ideas they can't hear from a producer.
Great comment. Great comment.
Hello, I'm part of the class of 2017, and we are currently working on a little paper about transgenic animals. Do you have anything to say about the role of that in future technology?
No. No, I think we need to investigate technologies, new technologies, anything that's going to help accomplish what we need to for the future in terms of more food. It needs to be done responsibly, and that's a critical thing. And I think that the concern of the welfare of livestock and animals today is such that I'm confident that we won't make some of the mistakes we made in the past, right, in terms of doing that. But it all needs to be kept in perspective, and it all needs to be carefully viewed from the standpoint of what's the welfare of the animals before the end.
I think, well, in answer to the first part of the question, is I believe that the public likes better to hear from agriculture themselves, the people that actually touch animals every day. So I think if you're involved in production agriculture, not only do you have to be transparent, but you have to tell your story. I mean, I think that's the people become a little suspicious when other people tell your story. So I think if you feel good about what you do, I think you have to tell your own story. Back to technology and welfare, I do not think they are mutually exclusive. It also amazes me how the same people cannot wait for the next iOS version of a phone or some new feature in a BMW, or for instance, think that anybody's archaic that doesn't believe in stem cell research. And yet, when you apply any type of technology to agriculture, it inherently is bad until proven otherwise. And I think we're all to blame for that because we do not communicate very consistently, and we have people like Dr. Shearer has mentioned that profit is the first thing out of their mouth, and it just breeds a level of suspicion, especially when, you know, if you have neighbors, you see something on the news about child molestation or something, you know that probably is a rare event because you have friends and neighbors that are good parents, and so you can put things in perspective. When you see a skid loader move a down cow in a slaughter plant, you think that that is the only way cows are moved in slaughter plants because you have no perspective. And so I think it's incumbent on all of us that are involved in technology, in the industry, in the veterinary profession, to tell our story and not just have profit motives to do it. So that's my take.
While I agree that we need to tell our story, one of the things that really bothers me about the way we in agriculture approach this is that we say that we must stand together. And there are things that we do that I think are wrong. And no, I know you didn't like. And so, yes, we need to tell our story, but we cannot ignore the bad actors, and we cannot stand up for them. And I also think something that I just forgot. Oh, it had to do with the hunter. And it's unrelated, but it's related. I did a lot of rat research in another life, and I had a dream where St. Peter was a big white rat. And it makes you think about things differently. And so the thought that I had forgotten was the difference between buying an iPad and using technology in livestock is that we often tend to forget that we're dealing with a live animal. It's not a widget, it's not a replaceable creature, it is a live animal. And we can't forget that because the public doesn't forget that.
I just wanted to comment on the Fair Oaks question. For those of you who don't know, Fair Oaks Pig Adventure is a farm that was built in northern Indiana where people can go and watch production. It's built in a tall building, so you look down on pigs and the workers are doing their stuff every day. And your question is, how do you convince the PETA and HSUS and people that are complaining about that? The answer is you never will. There's a group of people who you will never convince. The goal, though, is to educate the rest of the people who are actually interested and have an open mind. So that's the answer to that question. The other thing about technology, I built a hog barn this summer, and I put the technology in so I can look on my iPad and I can tell you the exact temperature and the ventilation rate and the feed system is running this morning right on my iPad. So anywhere I am, it drives my wife crazy when I'm on vacation because I'm always looking at my building. So that's some of the technology that can help enhance welfare of the animals. I know if the temperature gets messed up, I know there's something going on. There's a heater out, there's a fan cover off, something's going on. So I call my worker, my employee, and say, something's wrong, we can't maintain temperature in this room, so we need to get out there and figure out what's going on. So, good reason to have technology.
Great comment, thanks. Yeah.
Hold on. I'm a small animal practitioner, and one of the reasons I went into small animal is because during my education, there's a lot of things I saw in the large animal industry that just turned me off. And I think that what's important nowadays is, if indeed one of the things we are actually working for and toward is better welfare of the animals we're consuming, is that veterinarians as a profession are educated with respect to what we're doing to change some of the things we used to see. Because I really feel uneducated, and I also feel that when the welfare groups took the first move to change some of the things versus the veterinarians, then I think we kind of lost out, because I think that should have been our place. We should have been the ones to say first, this is wrong. And that might just be, that's just my comment. common, except the biggest thing is like, let's educate ourselves in our profession, and then everything is getting better.
Couldn't agree more with you, and colleges of veterinary medicine across the country are trying to make that change right now. It's not easy for all of them to do that without the dollars to establish new programs and hire faculty to do that and so forth. But I absolutely agree with you. I went through veterinary school. I never did ever hear the word welfare the entire way through. Nobody taught me how to euthanize anything. Nobody taught me how to deal with those things. And so, yeah, there's so many things that I think in the old days when I went through, I know we didn't do well. And we're trying to do that better these days, and I hope that's happening more so around the country. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Great comment.
Okay, I think we have about a 15-minute break, and let's thank Dr. Shearer.